So at the outbreak of war, Maximilian von Pischowicz's orders were very strict and very clear. His German 8th Army were to remain in its position in eastern Prussia without attempting any offensive action, as all German efforts were to be concentrated on the Western Front against France, according to the Schlieffen Plan. In addition, should the Russians increase their pressure on eastern Prussia, he was authorized to fall back as far as the Vistula River in Poland and abandon East Prussia. The 8th Army comprised of the 4 corps: the 1st Corps under Hermann von Francois, the 17th Corps under August von Mackensen, the 1st Reserve Corps under Otto von Below, and the 20th Corps under Friedrich von Schlotz, plus 1 cavalry division, facing the Russian First Army of Paul von Renningkampf, yes, the most Russian name I know, and his Second Army of Alexander Samsonov. The Russians enjoyed a considerable numerical superiority, but were hampered by the significant deficiencies in their services of supply and few communications. Francois was convinced that German training and equipment made up for their lack of numbers and was pressing for an offensive action. Francois was convinced that German training and equipment made up for their lack of numbers and was pressing for an offensive action. On the 17th, he launched his own initiative against all orders, an attack against the Russian First Army at the Battle of Staloponen. By the time he withdrew to Gumbinnen after the battle, his corps had inflicted 5,000 casualties and managed to capture about 3,000 Russian prisoners. With this success, Francois persuaded Pischowitz to launch his offensive against the Russian First Army, while the Second Army was still far to the south. Francois argued that his troops, many of whom were native East Prussians themselves, would be demoralized by retreating and leaving their homeland to the Russians, and that the Russians were not as strong as they appeared to be, despite the numerical superiority. A radio message that did not use codes supported this assessment. Pischowitz was convinced, and he started to engage Renningkampf at the earliest possibility, pitting 150,000 Germans against 200,000 Russians. This decision was against the orders of Helmut von Moltke the Younger, the German chief of staff at the time, which specifically ruled out any offensives on the Eastern Front until France was defeated in the West. On the 19th of August, Russian cavalry came into contact with a German infantry regiment outside of Gumbinnen. Instead of withdrawing, the Russians dismounted and brought up their artillery to continue the fight, driving the Germans back. However, they suffered 400 casualties as well, and after expending most of their ammunition, were forced to retreat themselves. This was the signal to Francois and what he was waiting for, and he was convinced Pischowitz to launch a counterattack the very next day. With Pischowitz's approval, Francois started to move the 1st Corps forward that same night, reinforced by the 1st Cavalry Division. At 4 a.m. on the 20th of August, the 1st Corps attacked the Russian 20th Division, which put up a spirited artillery defense. However, the Russians were always lacking in supplies, and they were soon expending their ammunition of artillery. This left them at the mercy of the German artillery crews, and they were forced to withdraw and retreat 8 kilometers in the early afternoon. The lines were stabilized and the Russian 29th Division arrived, and the battle turned into a stalemate. In the south, Mackensen's 17th and Bellow's 1st Reserve Corps were still moving up and were not ready for combat. Hearing von Francois' actions further north, von Mackensen attacked Renningkampf's 3rd Corps at 8 o'clock, but von Bellow was not able to join until noon. The Russians in the area were well aware of the German intentions, and due to von Francois' attack, had spent the time preparing an assault by moving their heavy artillery forward. At first, the German advance went well, but faltered only once when the Russian artillery started to fire, and the Russians were able to turn their flanks and force them to retreat in disorder to the Insterburg-Anneberg line, leaving 6,000 prisoners in Russian hands. The uncharacteristic sight of the defeated German soldiers stream mob-like to the rear really unnerved Pischowitz, who feared his army could be trapped between Renningkampf and Samsonov. Although the former did not really seem to engage the pursuit of the retreating German soldiers, Pischowitz panicked, and with a decision out of proportion to the severity of the situation, ordered a general retreat to the Vistula, leaving Eastern Prussia to the Russians. Helmut von Moltke's reaction. Pischowitz panic, don't panic, affected von Moltke though, who feared that Berlin itself could be now threatened by the advancing Russians. The chief of staff reacted by moving Pischowitz and his deputy Waldersee, replacing them with Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff. He also transferred 3 corps and a cavalry division from the Western Front, which had been greatly considered to be an incorrect decision, as it weakened some scholars and said fatally that German marching wing that was intended to rapidly move across Belgium to outflank and destroy the French army. One seemingly minor outcome of the battle would be the lasting effects. After the battle, a note was found on a dead Russian officer or soldier that outlined a greater part of the Russian plans for the campaign. As Hindenburg recalls, it told us that Rheinkamp's army was to pass the Masurian lakes to the north and advance against the Isterburg-Anderburg line. It was to attack the German forces and presumed to be behind the Anderkap, which the Newer army or Samsonov's army was to cross the Lutritz-Ullaberg line to take the German flank. Armed with this intelligence, Hindenburg and Ludendorff halted their German retreat and decided to take the initiative, and this would result in the Battle of Tannenberg, one of Germany's greatest victories. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. A bit long, I did re-record, but hope you enjoyed, hope you liked it, and I'll see ya next time. Enjoy. Wash your hands. Peace out. Time to exercise.